Okay, here's a pro tip. If you've ever got to move a car that hasn't been started in 3 or 4 years, don't just put a battery in it, pour gas in it, get it fired up, rev it up, throw it in gear, and go. Check the brakes first. At least make sure when you step on the brakes, there's some semblance of a pedal. Because I had to move Mrs. Landy. She's been sitting back there. Okay, well, they're coming today to trim all of these trees. So I had to move all of the cars from the back. So Mrs. Landy hasn't been started in several years. So I got her running, and it just, not thinking, I just, poof, push and drive. And she went, and zero brakes. But on the bright side, the valance was a little denty to begin with, so no real harm done. All right, so did I accomplish a single thing that I had it set out to do this weekend? Did I work on anything that I was supposed to work on? Did I get anything done? No, of course not. Of course not. Why? Because I'm distracted, because that's what I do best. I get distracted by things. It's just my nature, okay? So I had to do something with our XJ, with the new XJ. I had to at least, I wanted to clean it out, so I did. I cleaned it out and found a lot of interesting stuff in there, including some receipts. It's been off the road since 2015, so it's been sitting around for 9 years. So I cleaned it out, and I said, well, okay, let me at least see what the status is on this thing, what its running status is, so I know where to go forward. And I had to do it all on the trailer because I got to keep everything. So I says, let's just see what we got on this thing. And before I get into that part of it, I want to talk about the outline, the basic rules of this particular build. Let me sit down. I talk about the basic rules of what we're going to do here with this XJ. And I think this is important because based on the comments, there was a lot of people who are very interested in this type of build, and they want to follow along at home. They want to experiment and try these things on their own vehicles. So I'm going to lay out the rules to this, and also I'm going to add a dimension, something that we've never done before. But it's like a playing field leveler, right? It's going to it's like the great equalizer, because okay, I'm doing it on this, but if you're doing it on a Camaro, or you're doing it on a Roadrunner, or you're doing it on a, whatever it happens to be, a Nissan, doesn't make any difference. This is kind of like the equalizer. I'll get to that in a minute. But here are the basic rules. Here's the basic outline, and this is this is exactly what I should have done with the Mission Impossible build, the 318, but I didn't, because I thought everybody was on the same page. But here are the rules. The first is that any part that goes on it, any part that's used in this build, has to be from this exact year, exact model Jeep. If it was optional, either to add or take away from this year, this model Jeep, then that's fine, okay? But no adding of aftermarket parts, period, the end. No mixing and matching from different years to get better parts. It has to be what this thing was born with. So any part that's used in this build has to be available either online or through a regular auto parts store, and it has to be ordered, it has to be looked up and ordered as, in this case, 1996 Jeep XJ 4.0 two-wheel drive 5-speed. That's it, no exceptions, okay? No aftermarket parts or mixing and matching of parts. Has to be the stuff it was born with, all right? So to make that clear, to make that very, very clear, okay? Now, exceptions to that. Anything that can be fabricated. No, wait, let me go back before I talk about exceptions. Now, when it comes to these parts, these stock parts, they can be modified in any way. You can do anything you want to them. Lighten them, grind them, cut them, and weld them back together again. It doesn't rewire them. It doesn't make any difference. But it has to start as that exact part. All right. The exceptions to that would be things that can be fabricated. stuff that you can, like, you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up ducting and make a cold air system. Like, for instance, perfect example. There's countless aftermarket cold air systems for these Jeeps, but we're not going to use any of them. If we can fabricate it ourselves, that's fine. So I'm going to fabricate. Right. So again, see, it's a great equalizer because not every car has aftermarket parts available for it. So we're going to fabricate a cold air system and whatever else happens to be. All right. Now, as far as lightening and gutting the vehicle, this is very important. This is crucial. Because I know I'm going back to my Mustang, right? I'm going back to my Mustang with the ideology of the Mustang. It has to remain completely 100% streetable. It has to remain completely 100% appearing to be stock. So no gutting of the interior, no removing of the back seat, no pulling out the carpets, no, right? Insulation, take the insulation out, you could do that, but the carpet's got to go back. So this way, somebody looks over this vehicle, they don't see any holes drilled and stuff, they don't see anything missing, there's no, okay? It's got to appear like a completely stock vehicle. Actually, very close to fast racing rules, you know, the factory appearing stock tire series, right? Very, very close to that. Pretty much that, exactly. Do whatever you have to do to it, but make sure that it looks stock. So that's important. Take anything off of it as long as it's not, you know. Now, in my case with this, I'm going to make two exceptions, but both of them are purely cosmetic. And the first is that I'm going to get rid of that grungy airbag steering wheel that's on there, and I'm going to put a stock earlier XJ steering wheel on there. It's inconsequential to the performance of the vehicle. It doesn't make any difference. And this one here has aluminum aftermarket wheels. They're thick aluminum aftermarket wheels, but they're the same exact size, they're the same diameter, and the same width as the stock wheels. They're on there, they look good. I'm going to call that even up, right? They're probably the same weight. There's no performance advantage or disadvantage one way or the other, so I'm just going to leave them. If they weren't already on there and it didn't look really good with them, then yeah, I would throw a set of stock wheels on it, but it is what it is. We're going to stick with the mechanical and the cosmetics of a stock vehicle. All right. I think that, oh, okay, so here's the added dimension I'm going to throw into this. Something that I've never seen done before, but it'll allow you guys at home that want to attempt this stuff on your own vehicles to kind of like benchmark a level of parity. So instead of going with just ET improvements, we're going to go with percentage of gain, right? That's going to be an important element to this, percentage of gain. So let's just say, for example, and I'll just use 1/8 mile times and round it off just for simplicity's sake. So this is just an example. Why do people always take everything so literally? This is just an example. So let's just say you were talking 1/8 mile times and it goes a 10.00 in the 1/8 mile. And we eventually get it to go a 9.00 in the 1/8 mile. That would be a 10% gain, all right? So that's what we're going to shoot for here. Not only are we going to keep track of the ETs, and our goal is to get it down into the 13-second range, but the percentage of gain is going to be important. So this way, regardless of what you're working with at home, if you're following along with this, you can measure your percentage of gain and compare it to our percentage of gain. You know, beat us at our own game with your gain. All right. So let me bring you up to speed and tell you why I didn't work on anything that I was supposed to work on this weekend. Because I needed to see if this thing was going to start, if it was going to run. Found that it was off the road since 2015. So 9 years it's been off the road. Now you know I got to drop the tank. I figured the pump might be bad. Let me, okay, make the light better. I figured the pump might be bad. So just the same, let's see what we have. Hooked the jump pack to it. Now remember, we bought this thing with no keys, so I had to pull the ignition cylinder, or the ignition switch out, extract the cylinder so I could use a screwdriver to turn it. There is no immobilizer device on this. That would, an immobilizer device would be a deal breaker on anything that I own. It's just a level of complication I just do not want to deal with. But these XJs don't have immobilizer devices on them. It's just a straightforward ignition switch. So extracted the cylinder from it, plugged it back in, used a screwdriver, and cranked it. So the first thing was, is I hooked a jump pack to it, cranked it. I got cranked, and the motor sounds, it spins, and it's got, you can hear each cylinder hitting compression wise. So I know we have a sound engine there. I mean, I can't tell you if it's going to knock or anything like that. I have no idea. But it has 6 cylinders where what I can tell by ear is relatively even compression. So I know we're good there. And I didn't want to crank it too long because I'm dragging, remember this thing's off the road for 9 years. So you're dragging a dry cam against dry lifters, and you don't want to screw things up. So I only cranked it for a few seconds just to make sure that I heard each cylinder going ek, 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 and it's even. All right. Well, now will it start? Will it start? So again, the gas in there is 9 years old, and I would expect that the pump is probably going to be bad. So I turn the ignition just to the on position, and I get no pulse. I'm not hearing any pulse, any pump pulse. All right, so is this the relay or is it the pump? So here, let's go outside. Is it the relay or is it the pump? So now, connecting and disconnecting the jump pack, leaving the ignition on, I'm hearing the ASD relay click, so I know that that circuit is good. So the ASD relay controls both the fuel pump and the injectors, all right? So I know that the ASD relay is good. I'm not getting any action from the fuel pump relay. So I took the trusty jumper wire, pulled the relay out, tripped it out, and still nothing. I got nothing. So, but I do have 12 volts to the relay. So now the only thing that could cause the pump not to run is either the pump bad or breaking the wire between the relay and the pump. So I got underneath, took the wires off the pump, jumped them out, put 12 volts directly to the pump, and I got nothing. So I know the pump is bad. I know the pump is dead. That must be what killed this thing, right? Now, it had a bad pump, and they decided not to fix it. Okay, here come the trucks to do the trees, so it may get loud in here. Okay. So I said, well, let's try to start it anyway. Yeah, it's definitely going to get loud. I think I'm going to have to take this video to another location so we can finish this up. I'll be right back. Okay, so there's no way I could compete with the chainsaws over at the shop. So I came here. It's a little spot about a mile away. It's called Nice Mill Dam, and it's so nice. It's beautiful here. Look, there's people fishing down there, right? What better place to talk about diagnosing computer problems with a Jeep, right? So, where do we leave off? All right, the pump is dead. We know the relay is good. We know we're getting juice to and from. All of that's fine. But we're not getting an injector pulse. We know the pump is dead because we ran 12 volts directly to the pump. No action. So let's take that out of the equation. So well, let's see if we can get this thing to start off just dripping some gas down the throttle body. So I whip out the squirt bottle, I give it a squirt of gas down the throttle body, crank it, nobody home, no reaction, no nothing. So now I'm starting to notice things all around under the hood. There were probe marks on all of these wires going from the fuse box into the computer. There's probe marks everywhere. All right, that's a clue. Somebody was trying to figure out, they had a head scratcher here. And it has brand new spark plugs, like brand new. So somebody put a set of brand new plugs in it in an attempt to try to get this thing to start. Somebody was pulling their hair out, trying every little thing, and that's how this Jeep ended up sidelined. So I said, oh, let's pull some codes out of this. Let's see what it's got. So I go back inside, and I'm gonna pull codes out of the thing, and I turn the key to the on position, and I notice I have no check engine light. All right, so now we've got an issue that's beyond the obvious. clearly, right? So let's start checking power. So I pull the wires off the ECM. And remember, it's never the ECM. The ECM, that was the rule of thumb if you go back to like the 80s and the 90s when these things were really just starting to come along. It's never the computer, it's always something else. Because originally, when we were making that transition from carburetors to fuel injected, like half the cars on the road were carbureted, half of them were fuel injected, it was the common thing. Oh, it's the computer. The computer's bad. Blame the computer. It was never the computer. It was always a short, a break in the wire, a bad O2 sensor, whatever. It was always something like that. It was never the computer itself. So that was the rule of thumb. It's never the computer. It's the last place you look. But wiring to the computer, different story. So at this point, I guess there's no check engine light, no spark, no fuel pump pulse, no injector pulse. It's got to be something now surrounding the ECM, PCM, ECU, whatever you want to call them. PCM, powertrain control module. So I pull the wires off, and now I'm checking for voltages, and I got voltage where I'm supposed to have voltage. I have ground where I'm supposed to have ground. It's never the ECM or PC. It's never the powertrain control module until it is. So before I crack this thing open, I throw a text to my friend Dex. Just Dex it. He's used to be called Dex's Jeeps. And this guy, he owns like 700 XJs. This is like the XJ guru of all gurus. He says, let me pick his brain real quick. So I text him and he says, okay, Dex, 96 XJ 4-liter 5-speed, right? No check engine light, no spark, no injector pulse, no pump pulse. He says 96s are known for bad PCMs. I says, really? Okay. So with that, I says, well, let's crack this thing open and see what we find. Now, generally speaking, if you can get into a PCM, if it's serviceable, if you open the thing up, you will almost always, like 99.9% of the time, the problem will become obvious. It'll be a burst little thing, or it'll be a burn mark in the printed circuit. It'll be something. There's always something visual to give you a clue. Well, this was no exception. So okay, let me see here. Let me set this up so we got good light on it. Okay. So, so you see here, we've got these 3 capacitors, right? There's this one, and this one. Well, if you look, let me get this camera in there. You can see the discoloration. Look at the right connector, and you see that it's discolored. And look at the circuit board underneath it; it's discolored. And we have the same thing. My thumb is in the way. We have the same thing there. So these things are neat, by the way. They open like a book. There's an aluminum like plate that goes in here. This folds down, and it's all bolted together. But you take these bolts out, you got to be really careful. It's got this gasket material here. You got to be really careful. You pry it so you break that seal, and then you just open this up like a book, and there it is. You take that aluminum center section out. So at any rate, we have 2 of 3 capacitors are bad. So what's the next step with this? I am not good with soldering. Like, you know, a man needs to know his limitations, and I know that if I even think about touching that, I'm going to screw it up. So Dr. Art just happens to be, that's his thing. He lives for computers. So I'm going to drop this over at Dr. Art. If you want to see how it's repaired, he'll do the whole thing on his channel on how to fix it. He'll give it back to me. I'll stick it back in the Jeep, and hopefully we have found the last of the issues. But again, according to Dex, who knows these things, right? Just Dex it is his channel. If you're even remotely interested in XJs, this is a guy, or Jeeps in general, really. This is a guy who you definitely want to follow. And let's let Dr. Art work his magic on this thing. We'll throw it back in and see what we got. And now, in the meantime, I'm going to try to get back to the original program. I got to get that propane motor in the Belvedere. Stay away from the Jeep. Stay away from the Jeep. Isn't this beautiful out here? Look at this. You know, I wish I was inclined to go fishing, but I really don't have it in me. You know, as much as I would really love to fish, I can't. It's just not there. You know what I mean? See you tomorrow.